Now, my guest writes that the message she intends for parents in Good Enough Mothering, the best of the blog, is that there is no perfect. Good enough is good enough. And I think I should ask Dr. Heffner just what she means. Greetings.
I'm so glad that you asked me that question, because I get very interesting reactions to that statement. Some people think that it's just an obvious truism, but a number of mothers have told me they feel as though it's a put down because they don't want to be just good enough, they want to be perfect. And that is really the basis of a lot of what I'm trying to do in this book, is help them understand the concept of good enough. The idea of a good enough mother really is due to a famous pediatrician and psychiatrist, D.W. Winnicott. And he wrote and worked in the late 40s and 50s. And he came up with this idea of the good enough mother. And what he really meant by it was that the idea of a perfect mother, which he felt many of his colleagues, this was the era of Freud and psychoanalysis and a big influence of psychoanalytic theory on the whole idea of child rearing. And mothers came in for a lot of scrutiny. And Winnicott thought they should not be setting such standards of perfection. He talked about the average, the ordinary devoted mother. And so his idea of good enough was a mother who really was not going to just be there and jump at every one of her child's wishes and requests, because that would not really be that helpful, would not be growth producing. But good enough meant that she would help him, nurture him, help him or her grow and develop. And so that was his message. But it's kind of ironic because Winnicott wrote during the period after the Second World War, when your ordinary devoted mother, was his phrase, was a mother housewife primarily, who was with her child pretty much 24/7. And so the kind of devoted ordinary mother he was talking about really doesn't have too much to do with today's world. Well, because what I have discovered is that women today, many of them, are really struggling to achieve the very thing that Winnicott was trying to dissuade them from. The difference is that the standards that he set, his definition of the good enough mother, I think many women today would consider perfection. I know I kind of smile when I read it because I think he sets a pretty high bar. So what I've tried to do is redefine the concept of good enough and show that that maybe we need to think about what mothering and parenting is in a slightly different way, because the kind of mothering that I think has been handed down through a lot of research, developmental research, and especially a lot of the writings of that whole psychoanalytic influence, is an idea about motherhood which, first of all, may or may not really be appropriate at any time, but certainly does not fit the life that women today want to lead. And that standard was possible only when women were ready to devote themselves in a certain way to child rearing, which I'm not sure that many women are today. And even those who are, they get really very invested in doing it perfectly. And they have an idea of perfection which is not realistic. Well, I've often considered an expert myself, so I have to be, I'm always trying to disabuse people of that idea. I think what I'm talking about is a prescriptive approach.
Prescriptive?
Yeah, prescriptive. In other words, if you do this and this and this, then everything is going to be wonderful. And the idea that if you don't do it exactly as you've been told to do it, if something you know, you're going to have pathology, you're going to have all kinds of things going wrong.
And you think mothers have been misled by that?
I know they have, and but they don't feel secure about what they're doing. And that's what I mean about thinking that you can make something perfect, or that it's even desirable. And in that, I agree with Winnicott completely, because one of my main messages to parents is that even if you could be this perfect mother that you somehow idealize, it would not be good for your children, because they would never grow up. If somebody is taking care of you and you know, making you totally dependent, well, you're not going to be a very strong individual. So there has to be frustration and things not going the way you like. And one of the things about, I'm sorry, about our culture is that we don't deal very well with negative feelings. Negative feelings are suspect. You're not supposed to feel bad. We have pills for everything, and all the commercials tell you that. You know, everything that anything that's bothering you, well, we have something to cure that. So we don't accept the idea that adversity is part of life, and this is how this is how children get strong, by facing things as they grow. Not obviously, we don't want to give them more than they can handle, but neither do we want to try to create a bed of roses. I have my own theory. Well, I don't know if it's only my theory, but I think that everybody has an idealized image of what mother should be, who mother should be. We all wish our own mothers had been this, that, or the other thing. I mean, either people idealize their mothers and try to persuade themselves that everything was wonderful, or they tell me the one thing I don't want to be the kind of mother my mother was, and they try studiously to avoid with their children some of the mistakes that they think that their mother made with them. So I do think that that's a kind of, if you forgive me, an unconscious thing that goes on.
Hostility toward Ma?
Sort of, or yeah, a feeling that mother is not as good as she should be, and a wish that she be something different than she is. Well, what it seems to me as I've looked at this is that what's really going on is a struggle about an authoritarian approach to child rearing versus the more permissive, I'll say democratic approach that we have adopted in this country. And we've gone through an evolution. I'm sure you're a historian, you are very well aware of of what child rearing was like in the Puritan era, and then in the years that followed. There was, children should be seen and not heard, respect your elders. The whole idea that I always quote that old joke about when I was a child, my parents got the white meat of the chicken. Now that I'm a parent, my children get the white meat of the chicken. When is it going to be my turn? So, not that everybody loves the white meat of the chicken, but the idea being that at one point, children were supposed to defer to parents, and now it seems to have gotten turned around, in which parents defer to their children a great deal. And I think that if you read things like the Chinese Tiger Mother or Raising Bebe or some of the other stuff that's come out, you'll see that what they're admiring is the authoritarian, I'm the boss approach. I think women and men too are hungry for a feeling of validation.
What do you mean, validation?
That they're doing a good job, and that what was that movie? The Kids Are All Right, and I think that we are in such a competitive society, and the educational system is broken, as everybody is aware. So there's such a competition for good spots in schools. And I think so much of raising your children is really a matter of values. I mean, what's important to you? When somebody says to me, I want to be perfect, I want to be a perfect mother, well, does that mean that you want to raise a perfect child? So who is this perfect child? Is this a child who gets a grade A? Is this a child who excels at sports? Is this a child who is an outstanding musician, a creative genius? What is this child? Who is this child who's going to make you feel like a perfect mother? So we're demanding something impossible of our children, that they should turn out in a way that will help us feel like perfect parents. And that's just not going to happen. So my philosophy and my outlook is that that children, they are going to be influenced much more by who you are than by what you do. Who you are as people, what your values are, what's important to you, how you treat each other, how you treat your children in that sense of, you know, mutual respect, I think in the end is much more important than you know, whether you've done exactly the right thing about weaning or exactly the right thing about toilet training or all these things that young mothers worry about with their little children.